So what I'm planning to do is give you a little bit of a walk with me on a journey, understanding how and why the no man's land of life, which is right in the middle, exists. And what I, as a gerontologist, my passion and purpose and mission is to shift how people understand midlife, because midlife, of course, if we shift how we understand that, impacts mastery stages later and later. So I want to kind of, I have PowerPoint slides, but I'm not making this an official presentation. We can speak throughout. I'm going to do a poll. I'm going to engage you. We're going to have an interactive exercise where I'm going to kind of prove something to you by you experiencing it yourself. And we're going to chat. So that's what I have planned. Let me tell you a little bit about me. And now is the first big risk I'll take in trying to get this screen share to work. So let's see if this works. Is this working, Sarah? So do you now see the picture of?
It's exactly how you want it, yes.
We're good.
Good. All right. And everyone can see the gallery on the side. Is that right? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so a little bit about me. I started being interested in aging when you see the picture of me and my dad on the left, probably around that age. My dad was a physician, and he would volunteer in a particular nursing home in Brooklyn, New York, called the Menorah Home and Hospital. And when he would go and volunteer, he would take me with him, and he figured it's a safe space. So I would sort of roam around. And I remember so distinctly the smell, that antiseptic smell, the white linoleum, the blue-white fluorescent lights. And I'd go into rooms and peek around, and invariably people would say, "What's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this?" And we would start to talk. Now, either I don't have the DNA or I'm just not smart enough. No one told me, be scared of old people, don't listen to old. I didn't know any of that. So it was fantastic. I was getting, at a very young age, all this positive reinforcement. People were listening to me. They thought everything I said was wonderful. And somehow I would hear parts of their life stories, and I just left feeling good, and it helped me help them. So throughout high school, I worked in nursing homes. And then the picture on the right is when I was in college, 4 months of the year, I was a recreational therapist. And so that's a picture from that time. By the time I was 25 years old, I got a master's degree in gerontology. So I've been in the field since really before it was recognized as the field of aging. And I've noticed trends over the years, and that's partly what I want to share with you today. What happened next, and actually, Luli Sutro and I met, I don't know if that you remember, years and years ago when you were, I think, creating this idea of the villages, and you were looking for a consultant. And
Villages.
yes, and another consultant and I, just in the research phase, chatted with you about it. I remember you so well from that time. So I've lived in California for years, and for years I did consulting with the county and with various organizations and with architects when assisted living facilities were just being created in the 1980s. If you remember, out of Oregon, it was a whole movement. So I had my trajectory through this aging field. And then clients started asking me if I would coach them. Now, the New Yorker in me thought, again, this was over 20 years ago now, what's coaching? I'd never heard of it. I thought it sounded kind of soft, so I didn't really pay attention until so many people asked me. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with coaching, but it's actually a very powerful skill set that someone's trained in to help others elicit the wisdom they have, which of course, as a gerontologist, is what I'm all about. How do I help people unearth their own wisdom, not like a therapist, who helps people understand, here's my baggage. We all have baggage, how to claim it, how to get rid of some of it, how to work with it. What a coach does is, if you can lift your baggage in the overhead, I say we take it on the road. So I went back to school again and became certified as a coach. And at that time was the only certified master's level gerontologist coach in the country. And I started what's called the Odyssey Group, and have been coaching people now for about 20 years. At the 15-year mark, my husband and I decided to take a gap year. Is everyone familiar? Thumbs up if you're familiar with what a gap year is. Kids often take it. I'm seeing some thumbs and some not. So a gap year is often considered a time where a younger person will take a year between high school and college, or between college and starting a job and doing something. Frankly, I think it's wasted on the young. We can appreciate it more. So when we became empty nesters, I have 3 children who are now in their 30s and 20s. We moved to Italy for a year. And we did it to live a wonderful, you can't get a bad meal. And also to get enough perspective on our lives and choices that we thought, at the time I was 53 and my husband was 55, we thought, let's figure out what we want to do when we grow up, now that we've finished, this stage is complete. We never figured that out because we kept saying domani, tomorrow. But we did gain a lot of perspective. And part of that perspective for me was learning from all the clients I had worked with for all the years and combining that with the information and the research. And what I noticed, well, let me go to the next slide and I'll describe to you a little bit of the history. So let me see now how to get this to move forward. Here we go. Here's what I realized. This chart shows you, if you look to the left on the bottom, it's 100,000 years ago, roughly. You can't even imagine how long, 100,000 years. And this is age going up. If you look hundreds of thousands of years, because the last 200 years are a blip in 100,000 years. For hundreds of thousands of years, we have not really aged. We've died at about 28 to 30 years old. And that was largely infectious diseases, accidents, things like that. And then around 200 years ago, it just started to shift. So where were we roughly 200 years ago? Think about George Washington time. George Washington, if you picture him, you're probably picturing that portrait with a white wig. Everyone know what I'm talking about? The white wig, right? Anyone know why he was wearing a white wig? You can speak up. I want to make this interactive. We're all here together. There aren't that many of us. Anyone know why the white wigs? He was wearing a white wig, as many people did, and in England, the barristers still do, because he wanted to look older. Because what is rare is precious. And especially in the time where there wasn't technology and information chain like this and this too fast, we needed culture carriers and wisdom holders in ways that we don't take advantage of. We're missing it today. But the elderly were venerated. So the outfits, they had white wigs, women too. And the men's outfits actually would make them look a little bit stooped. People wanted to look older. That started to change, and without spending too much nerdy time on history, but it's really important to get, why are we so confused about aging? Why do we feel like, oh, it's the beginning of the end in midlife? It's because we suffer from what I call cultural lagosis, a cultural lag that is causing an epidemic of ageism in our country. And it comes from the fact that forever, we didn't age, we died. And then all of a sudden it changed. And in 1935, during the Depression, when Social Security was enacted, for the first time, it was enacted so that we got people out of the workforce to make room for younger people, and to give those elderly people an ability to do so by adding what we call the third leg of the stool, which is, so that's what Social Security was meant for. But around 1935, there were a couple of facts you should know. Did people live to 65? No. People lived till about 59 years old then. Why? Because the government didn't want to pay out Social Security, right? But they did want to move people out of the workforce. And if they lived to that age, help support them to get people off the food lines. So the first thing is 65 never really meant anything. It was never a number chosen for any particular reason. In fact, they actually looked to the 1880s in Prussia when Otto von Bismarck chose 65 as the number for their pension program. People really, they lived to their 40s then. They also didn't want to pay out. The other thing that was interesting about that time around Social Security is people didn't know what retirement was. Culturally, we didn't retire. People worked until they couldn't work, until their families needed them, or until they weren't well enough to work anymore. So how did that change? Why is it when you think of the word retirement, what is associated with it? Anybody? What's some words associated with retirement?
Extra time.
Extra time.
Relax.
Relax. Mm-hmm.
I think pre-2020, it would have been fun.
Fun. Leisure, right? Why? How did that happen? Totally the American way, entrepreneurship. Anybody hear of Del Webb?
Yeah.
American entrepreneur. He said, and what do entrepreneurs do? They identify a problem and they think, how am I going to fix the problem in a creative way? Del Webb said, what is the problem? No one knows what to do with retirement because it didn't exist. I will tell people retirement equals leisure. And he created Sun City, Leisure World, all these age segregated communities. So again, 65 was never based on anything in particular. And the reason we have this erroneous idea that retirement equals leisure, which by virtue of falling into that trap means that's what you can do now. That's kind of a subconscious thought. Our society's gone that way and it hasn't changed. So when we approach 65, even though life expectancy in Marin County is higher, you probably know, than the average life expectancy in the US. So it's closer to our mid 80s here in Marin. And yet when we get to be midlife, we start feeling like, oh my gosh, 65 is coming. Why? So I will share with you and see if you can relate to this cultural kind of narrative.
Value this time in your life. This is the time in your life when you still have your choices. And it goes by so fast. When you're a teenager, you think you can do anything, and you do. Your 20s are a blur. 30s, you raise your family, you make a little money, you think to yourself, how much money? 40s, you grow a little pot belly, you grow another chin. The music starts to get too loud. One of your old girlfriends from high school becomes a grandmother. 50s, you have a minor surgery. You'll call it a procedure, but it's a surgery. 60s, you'll have a major surgery. The music is still loud, but it doesn't matter because you can't hear it anyway. 70s, you and the wife retire to Fort Lauderdale. Start eating dinner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 10, breakfast the night before. Spend most of your time wandering around malls looking for the ultimate soft yogurt and muttering, how come the kids don't call? How come the kids don't call? The 80s, you'll have a major stroke. You end up battling with some Jamaican nurse who your wife can't stand, but who you call mama. Any questions?
Jeez. I hope not.
I'm going to stop my screen share for just a moment, and I want everyone to come off mute for a moment. So just so far, if you come away from our time together with anything, I really want you to get, and I'm just going to be really explicit, it's BS, this whole stuff about not being needed and our downhill slog to the end once we hit retirement, because it was never based on any factual ideas about numbers. And at that time, people didn't live that long. Now we not only live longer, and I know I'm speaking to the choir, singing to the choir here, but we're not so much wanting to talk about aging anymore. I recently joined the advisory council of the Stanford Center on Longevity. And what we're talking about is longevity and increasing our health span. So we're not focused on the quantity. We're not focused on a chronological number. Because here's another big fact. Our chronological age does not define us in the ways that it used to. Because research has shown us that our health span, our ability to be vital and independent and engaged, has way more to do with the life choices we're making, not just in our 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, but our 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Research is showing that anywhere between 60 and 90% of our life expectancy individually is based on choices that we're making every day. So I want to take a little poll. Sarah's going to help with this. And ask you first to write in the chat. Does everyone know how to use the chat? Let me open mine.
No.
Write in the chat how old you are, the number, / how old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
Yes.
How old would you be if you didn't? Okay, so here's one. 74 is chronological age, 54. 73, 62. 73, 55.
We'll do the chats.
71, 50, 63, 50, 80, 35, 71, 55, 61, 42, 56, 42. Kind of interesting, isn't it? So Sarah, can we put up this poll? For how many of you would you have been older than your chronological age? Your perceived age is older than your chronological age, younger, or exactly the same? Sarah, can you put that poll up? I've lost you in my, can't see in my thing.
I put it in the chat.
The poll is in the chat?
Yeah, because we have to do polls in advance.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So, got it. You're right. And we didn't do that because of the size of the group. So what I can tell you is looking at this, 71, 55. There's one person who would be the same age. And otherwise, every single one of us is younger.
Yeah.
So again, if you take anything away, culturalagosis, we lived hundreds of thousands of years till about 30, and then it skyrocketed, leaving us confused. Social Security started this idolatry of all things youthful because we shifted people out, told everyone, younger and older, oh, retirement means leisure. Go have some fun. That's all you're good for. The underlying kind of some assumptions that have taken hold. And now that we understand more about how to take care of our spirits, minds, bodies, we know that a number does not define us. And so as a result, and I do this all the time, and I do this with people all over the country, some international, and I always get this kind of response. 2 times people have said they feel older than their chronological age. But what happens is our spirits don't age. our spirits are ageless. I remember when my Oma, my grandmother, would sit with me when I was a child, and she was probably only in her 70s at the time. But I remember her so vividly looking in the mirror and then saying to me, Barbara, I look in the mirror and sometimes I wonder, who is that old lady staring out? And it always stuck with me. I didn't really know what to do with that, but for some reason it stuck. And now I realize it's exactly what we're all sharing. So remember, I am waving my magic wand, ending 2020, and I'm telling you in 2021, you are no longer assigned a number to define you.
Yay.
You're free.
Yay.
It's a gift. And something I wanted to share.
Barbara, can I bring up something?
Yes, I was just gonna
When I
say, any
started,
comments?
I'm sorry. When I started Age Friendly Corte Madera, I became aware of Pauline Engelman, who is now 112, and it shifted my entire perspective on aging. To be surrounded by people every year, we honor people that are 90 and greater, and they're vibrant and they're valued and they're wonderful people. And it made me think, oh my God, I'm only 70, I guess 70 or whatever I was at the time. Now I'm 73. And I feel like, well, Pauline's 112. I've got many decades to go. So it really shifted my perspective on aging to feel like I'm not at the end. I'm not anywhere near the end. So that's
Beautiful.
something that has benefited me and inadvertently benefited the community.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other comments? You're welcome to push back if you have questions or don't agree with something or support it, whatever. What do you think?
Marin
Yes,
has a comment.
When I look in the mirror, I think I'm seeing my mother, and like the lady you quoted, I think, who is that old lady? So I look in the mirror less and hope other people will tell me if I have spinach on my teeth or mustard on my nose.
Yeah, I think it's a very common feeling.
Belinda has a comment, I
Yes.
believe.
Thank you. Hello to everybody. I'm so blessed to be, I'm listening to you, and this is exactly what I'm going through. And I'm currently writing my memoirs. And this is going to be a chapter because I haven't seen much reading on how wonderful it is to be in your 70s. And by the way, I never tell anybody my age because I feel like 20 years younger. And I hope you get this message out to everybody because society doesn't seem, I was in the Peace Corps years ago, and if you travel anywhere in the world, you see how other cultures revere the wisdom of their elders. And I mean, here, the American Indians, you know. So anyway, thank you so much. I totally love what you're saying. I'm right there.
Thank you. I just put it's my name, barbarawaxman.com, in the chat. I want to encourage and invite you to go to my website, sign up. I have a blessedly infrequent newsletter, and I have a quiz. You can go there. I'll put it in the chat. I have created, and I'll mention this again at the end, a quiz called the 5 to Thrive quiz that helps you assess at any age your mojo and how to amplify it. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that later. But in terms of sharing my message, I'm also giving a TED Talk the end of January on the myth of the midlife crisis. And as we move on, I'm going to go back to my slides and tell you a little bit more about something I've done with all the information I've shared so far. What am I doing with it? But first, I saw a couple of other hands. I think Kevin, yeah.
Yes, can you hear me, Barbara?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. SCOM, by the way, is a local organization at the College of Marin. Emeritus, most of what you would know is emeritus students. We've got over 2,000 members in our lifelong learning group there. And I just want to reinforce one of the biggest issues we have. Well, there's two. One I'm looking at on the screen. 75% of our members are female, and I notice in this one we're 90% female. So that's one of the issues with the isolation that males have. But number two, of course, with the pandemic, Zoom's a big win, but we're seeing week in, week out, isolation is the biggest threat and danger for well-being in our cohort.
You know, I think you bring up a really salient and important point, Kevin. I have been I've been doing a lot of experimenting during COVID. And one of the experiments is I've had people have asked me to do more workshops. Frankly, I don't do a lot of them because I don't want to deal with the administration of them. It takes me away from actually doing the work. But in any case, I did some, and we call them the thriving circles. And what we have been finding is that men have wanted to join the women, but the women want to be with the women.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a real need for groups. And so I'm considering that because I've gotten so many, not tons, but a number of men who are saying, we really want to be a part of that. We also need an outlet. So that's not exactly what you were saying, but I think it supports your sense that men don't participate as much, but it may not be a reflection of their lack of interest.
Oh, I think that's correct. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
Baron, you had your hand up. Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, a lot of what I was thinking has been articulated by other people along the way. And to the point, we have an opportunity to experience ourselves in a new way because of our access to technology and each other from afar. And in that process, there is no delineation between someone who's old and someone who's young. You can press a button, you have the same capabilities as somebody who's a third of our age. So aging really has changed in my opinion, its definition by how one thinks about themselves in that context.
Mm-hmm. Darren, I think that's an excellent point. I would add, when I speak with younger people, with millennials, I say, don't worry, you'll be able to be where I am if you're lucky. Because the way I see it, and I'm 58, this is the most awesome place to be. I mean, I've learned from the failures that they've got to go through, right? We need to, and we continue to have our life like an EKG with the ups and downs. We can add so much wisdom and make people's journeys somewhat easier, sharing our experiences. And so more of those intergenerational bonds, I think, are ready to be built. I know younger people don't necessarily know how to ask for the mentorship in the right way, but they're hungry for it. And we have so much to offer. So it's not only about our staying in the game enough to be relevant, it's also recognizing, just by being who we are, what we have to offer, and then how to articulate it so it could be heard. So thank you for sharing. That was a really
The challenge, thank you. And thank you for adding to that. And my challenge, as I perceive it, has to do with the impatience of younger people. They're accustomed to having instantaneous gratification.
Yes, yes.
Their communications, they don't even spell out words. It's YMS, TYSM, thank you so much. They don't even spell out thank you so much. So the challenge is for them, anybody, not generational, but for people to understand that patience is required.
Yes. I think it takes a mutually beneficial society and mindset to be able to say, because I've gone through this and I get this, that we're not going to change the shortening of words. I know half the time I mentioned I've got a 25-year-old, a 29-year-old, and a 31-year-old. So they know not to use so many short things, but sometimes I'm like, what does that mean? That's not going to change. And you know what? It's a language. It's a new language. And who am I to judge it? The world is continuing to move on. And at the same time, I can remind them about other things that I know will help them be better, more grounded people. Be patient. Like at jobs, they're like, I haven't gotten a promotion and it's been 4 months. And just having the pathways of communication open enough to say, I hear you, you know, first accept where they are, and then inject some of the need for patience, and wow, are they hungry for it? So that's more of a coaching thing, but yeah, it's challenging. Any other comments? Lisa?
I'd like to say something. This is Sarah. You know, this is almost a 180 from what Patty brought up, that we look at those that are living into their hundreds and can be inspired. I'm thinking that within this year, we have all seen the possibility of what we think is what our lifetimes may be, the possibility of the shrinkage, the possibility of an early end, the fear of the pandemic that has sort of seeped into our lives and our lives of our families and friends. And so there's also that while one can have a mindset that we have plenty of time to achieve, to do what we want, or to make new plans, if you will, and start afresh, there's also an underlying, at least right now, an urgency. You know, and yet the boundaries of what we can and can't do in this time frame anyway. So I don't know if you could speak to that, but I feel like it's almost like we've got a carpe diem slap in our face every day at the same time, while we should be settling in and saying, what can I plan for once this is over?
I'll mention it now. I'll bring it up now. It's going to be on one of the slides later. There's something that a professor out of Stanford, the founder of the Center on Longevity, discovered in her research, and it's called the future time perspective. And it's this sense that the older we get, there's some fulcrum, there's some point, and it's around midlife, where we switch from I have all the time in the world to looking at time left, not necessarily in a morbid sense, but there's a fulcrum shift. You guys, thumbs up if you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah. So there's this internal shift, like time left. Part of that is time is sweeter. Back to the gray wigs. When something is rare or rarer or more, it becomes more precious. So there's something called, I'll mention later also, the U curve of happiness. The older we get, the happier, more content we are. Because we realize on balance, things are pretty good. How do we balance that, Sarah, to your point? That sense with the urgency we feel. I'm losing people I love, and I can't even go see some of them. This has happened in my family. How do I do this? How do I deal with this? And funny enough, there are tools. One of the best tools is meditation.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a guru. You don't have to sit for an hour. You don't have to drive out to Spirit Rock. I don't even know if they're having people there now. There are apps that you can use on your phone. One is called Headspace. I'll put it in the chat. There's a free 10-day, headspace.com, free 10-day trial. If we all know, oh, you should exercise every day, right? You should train your body. Well, we have to train our minds. They're more and more cluttered with junk that comes at us, with news that we want to know, but we don't want to know, with emotion. How do we clear it out? How do we train our brains to focus and know how to separate the urgent from the important? And part of that is the streamlining that meditation can get you into. So I'd encourage you guys to try Headspace for 10 days free and see if you feel a difference. Sarah, does that address enough of your question?
Thank you. Yes, it does. I think most of us are being pulled as we look towards the future and the vaccine taking over and the light at the end of the tunnel. There's excitement about what we can do moving forward, but then there's that daily, we're still here, you know, so.
Yeah.
Thank you. It does.
how to help keep our equanimity throughout it all. Okay, anything burning, or can I go back to Gail? Do I see your hand?
I want to hear from Lisa. She had her hand up and I've met her before and usually she has good thoughts.
All right, Lisa, good stuff.
Wow, thank you. So I actually had two observations, and my mind kind of has gone to probably three since Sarah just spoke. But one was I've worked at Marin Villages, and I think in my time while working with a lot of our seniors there, I got to a point where I realized most of the time when I was going to call somebody to get some advice, the average age was going to be like 90 of the people that I was calling. My 100-year-old friend, my 90-year-old friend, you know, they usually were the ones that could give me the best for the dog. The other thing that I found is that when you get on your Zoom, everybody wants to talk to you. So, excuse me. But with regards to the younger kids, one of the things that we experienced just recently was how much they appreciate some of the traditions that they don't really seem like they care about. We have a friend, 17-year-old kid, and we were going to decorate her tree. And she'd be the last person that we would think to say, hey, we're going to decorate our tree. But we mentioned it while we were at her mom's house, and she actually said, you cannot decorate your tree unless I'm there, because I've done it with you every year. So you kind of realize that there's a lot of mentality in the younger kids that you don't really know you're having an influence on them, but just being with them and including them, whatever space they want, you know, you let them have their space. And the last thing I wanted to say was, I took this gap year. I'm going to call it a gap year. And while you have that urgency to do things, this year has been really good because I can sit back and just say, you know, I have been around all these incredible people that are in their 80s now, and I still have time because they have gotten their starts in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s. So there's so much that you can be grateful for because there's time. There's always time for things. You just have to breathe and know what you want to focus on. So thank you, Gail. It's good to see you too.
Thank you for sharing that. So what I want to shift into next is twofold. One, I'm going to, as the entrepreneur in me, talk to you about part of how I want to solve for the problem of the no man's land of midlife, which by being this no man's land hurts the ages that come later. And it's hard to assign ages to this because midlife is so fluffy. You know, who knows how long it's going to be. So I'm trying to establish something here. So let me go back to share my screen. Okay, and now go.
Value this time
we
in
already
your
saw
life.
this. I want to go
It's because this
to the next slide.
value this time in your life.
Here we go. So, I don't know if any of you have ever heard the phrase, if you can name it, you can tame it. So this no man's land, I realized, is a lot like another stage in our lives. Anyone ever hear of adolescence? Adolescence was only named in 1904, so 115 years ago, 116 years ago, by a psychologist named Stanley Hall, who recognized, again, you could put, it's so fascinating from a cultural perspective. It was when there were families leaving farms, moving to work in industry in cities. So kids were being taken out of school. They were getting hurt at work. So there were social, political, cultural, and economic reasons that and physical reasons, Stanley Hall, the psychologist, said, this is actually a stage of life when kids' hormones are changing and they feel like they don't know who they're going to be in the world, and their bodies change and all of that. Okay, so here's what I want to tell you. Without assigning an exact age, although I have a range, we now live long enough that we go through adolescence a second time, this time sort of in reverse. Our hormones change. Now, it changes for men too, although that doesn't get talked about so much. Our bodies morph in this time in ways we may not be so crazy about. We have this identity shift. I'm no longer in the workforce the way I was with that respect. I'm no longer parenting kids. I no longer have some of the roles that have defined me. Who am I? Who do I want to be when I grow up, even though I'm supposed to be a grown-up? We share these commonalities with adolescence. However, this time, if it becomes associated with, oh, we're supposed to reconsider things in midlife, because when I recently took the life expectancy calculator, that's very specific based on life choices I'm making, it says I may live another 46 years. So I'm just really getting going now, right? I've checked a number of boxes and I'm freer than ever to do the things that I want to do from a more cognitive perspective and make an impact. So how can we help more people understand that you're not stuck? Your story hasn't been written just because you're 50 or 60 or 70, that you have agency, that you have choices to make when you no longer define yourself by a number. Well, I think the best way to do that is to go back to that. If you can name it, you can tame it. So I've named this stage middlescence, like adolescence, middlescence. So it's like adolescence I have on this slide, but with wisdom. And in order to understand it, and I've mentioned a few of these things, so I'll race through it because I want to make sure we have time for some of the other good stuff I've got planned. Number one, and I want to invite all of you, I'm giving this TED Talk January 30th. You can look on my website, and if you sign up, there's going to be information about it. So I won't talk about it a lot here, but I will tell you this. I've done surveys asking people, what do you picture when you think of midlife crisis? And it is quite consistent. And it is not based on any research. It is based on the idea of a 48-year-old psychoanalyst in 1965. And it stuck. It sold. Fear sells. So I'm going to dispel that myth and instead have people understand, like adolescence, it is a time of change and growth. And that can be hard, but it's not a crisis. So for more, listen to my TED Talk. The other thing I just want to touch upon is we don't stop developing just because we're adults. We don't stop growing and evolving and learning. Adult development is a thing. So once you're a grown-up, I mean, probably everyone here is like, oh, I'm waiting to grow up. In some ways we feel fully baked, and in other ways we're like, oh, to stay up with the world, we're all on this Zoom call together. I mean, we're all staying up, and we continue to develop and grow and consider, what do I want to take on and what do I choose not to be a part of? Future time perspective, I talked about Laura Carstenson's work, Life Gets Sweeter, which leads into this. I mentioned this before, so I'll spend just a minute on it. This study around the U-shaped curve of happiness. It is actually based on international data. Most of my data is US based, but this is international data that shows when we're in our 20s and we feel like I can make mistakes, I've got all my life. And then our happiness actually decreases until about 48.7 to be exact. And why is that? Well, whether or not we have children, but for many of us, we have the burdens of having the most meaningful years, perhaps. We're sad to become empty nesters, but trying to make a family work, trying to pay the bills, trying to keep relationships going, trying to be caregivers for older generations, and all the rest of it. These are meaningful, fulfilling years oftentimes, but not necessarily our happiest, if you can believe it. And that bottoms out close to 50. And and it's not a crisis. Again, it's this shift that we need to say, I better revisit. Have I been living someone else's dream? Have I been so attached to roles that are no longer there for me, that it's holding me back from being happy? Can I really take on this idea that life is precious, every day is a gift? And we start to do that, and again, it's research, throughout the course of our lives, we are happier and happier, more fulfilled, more content. And that's what the research shows. So before, I want to move on to sort of a cool experiment with you, where I'm going to prove to you the power of your own mindset. But before, is there any burning question or comment about this? And I can't see everyone in the gallery, so if you want to take yourself off mute, and let me see if I can open up the chat so I can see.
I'm looking at everyone's pictures. If you, yeah, just unmute yourself if anybody has a question. Right now, it looks like everyone's
good.
Everyone's good.
And by the way, this is my little manifesto. Look how it's really little. You can get it on Amazon, and it sort of, I'm trying to give you as much of the information. It's just a manifesto making the case. But if you want to be able to articulate why this can free people to have the best older years of their lives, it's in this little manifesto. Okay. So
Barbara, I posted the title of the book in the
Okay.
chat, but as I was doing it, I thought, is this appropriate for me? Am I still in middle years? Even though I'm going to be 112 like Pauline, I wonder, is this appropriate for someone 73?
So it is, because it's more, or let me talk about mindset and then we can come back to that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of mindset, but mindset is everything. If you speak to an elite athlete and you ask them about their training regimen, many of them will first talk to you about, I practice the course in my mind without ever leaving my room, over and over again. What you believe, our perceptions become our realities. So we have to ask ourselves, is my perception accurate? How do I test myself? And there's an author, and let me see if I got that book right here. No, it's in my bookshelf. An author, I'll write her name, Carol Dweck. No, Dweck. And she wrote a book called Mindset. I just put it in the chat. And she primarily talks about two kinds of mindsets. The first column, fixed or growth. So a fixed mindset is how most of us grew up. When you're young, you go to school. When you're in the middle, you have a family and you work. And at the end is leisure and family and kind of no stress or less stress. And that's how life should be. And when life isn't like that, when someone has skills that don't apply, but they haven't kept up with training because they're like, oh, you don't even realize it, but learning is for the young. That's a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is say, I am constantly evolving, whether I'm 50, 60, 70, 80, or 90. I want to continue to engage and enhance my ability to understand the world around me. Whether or not I choose to participate, I need to be able to make a conscious choice. That's a growth mindset. Then there's the mindset dichotomy of scarcity versus abundance. Scarcity is there'll never be enough. So a lot of people feel like there are only so many positions, so I'll never be able to get a job because all the younger people will take it. That's a scarcity mindset. And I won't be qualified. I'll look older. People won't want to hire me. That's scarcity. Because I can tell you as a coach, I'm an executive coach and a life coach. I help people once they can get in the mindset and then see what they need to learn and see what they need to unlearn. So then they can say, well, if I believe I can add value to this role, then they're going to make the space for me. And it is amazing when you get really clear, things happen, doors open. And then there's finally this mindset of winners and losers. And that's a lot of what's going on, and we won't digress into the politics now. You're a winner or a loser, and it's not helped our country. Whether people are right wing or left wing, we've all gotten into our silos. And it's a very tricky time where we almost can't help ourselves because we're so far apart. So what I want to talk to you about and show you is that mindsets serve us. There's a reason that we tend to get into a mindset and not even realize it. So we're going to do a little experiment. The next slide I'm going to show you, everyone put yourself on mute, and then you're going to read the words out loud, but we won't hear you, as quickly as possible. And then I'll tell you what's on the next slide. So let me go here, if I can make this work. Yeah. So read the words out loud as quickly as possible. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to go to the next slide. And on this one, I want you to read the color of the word. So you're not going to read the word, you're going to read the color, okay? And you're going to do it out loud to yourself, but out loud. Read the color. Okay, is everybody finished? Okay. So let's come off mute for a minute. What happened? Was there a difference?
Slower on number 2.
So why?
Got to think about it. You got to take another step.
What does that mean? So what does that mean for how do we know when we need to think about things and when we don't? Here I stopped you in your tracks with a very simple thing. But when it comes to seeing someone who doesn't color their hair, who may be walking with a cane, how do we even know if we have an age bias or not?
Well, preconceived notions get in our way.
But how do we even know when we have them?
We all have them. It's a question of acknowledging them and taking responsibility for them and then making adjustments about them.
Exactly right.
And perhaps being aware that cognitive dissonance is healthy, not unhealthy, when you realize at some logical level, you're simply not seeing the world as it is, but you're stuck in that old place, whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what this whole Me Too movement has been about. It's what Black Lives Matter has been about, to get past this cognitive dissonance based on biases and preconceived notions that are totally erroneous.
Mhm. Yep. So what does this have to do with ageism? And how can knowing a simple exercise like this help each one of you be a better ambassador, a better anti-ageist? You know, now we read a lot about being anti-racist. How can you be a better ambassador to be anti-ageist?
We have to walk the talk.
What does that look like?
Means when you look in the mirror,
You
you
don't see
don't
your
judge
mother.
yourself.
Yeah, when you look in the mirror, you don't see your mother or your father. You see the person that you are, the age that you are, acknowledge that that's the age that you are, and live the age that you feel.
That's right, which for all of us, well, one was the same, most of us is younger. And Sarah, you said something really important, which is we have to start with ourselves. Leadership is an inside job. And it means that we have to start by not judging ourselves. Here's what I can't do. So for example, when I needed a full hip replacement, I have friends who are like, oh, are you going to go to a rehab center? And oh, you know, this means that, you know, you're not going to be able to be as active. And I said, what are you talking about? We have the technology. I'm going to use it. I'm going to work on it. And it's awesome. My new hip is better now than my other old hip. So I didn't judge myself and tell myself a story that, oh, you know, when people need a hip replacement, it means they're old. A lot of people tell them that. I don't know if you know anybody, but I sure know people. We live in a bubble here in Marin, so it may not be as prevalent here. But in a lot of the country, people start needing stuff like that. And it's like, oh boy, yep, you're old. And it colors their world in ways like the colors we just went through, in ways they can't even see. So I want to encourage each one of you to leave, when we leave our session today, think about that. Think about how entrenched our mindsets are and how we use it against ourselves and how it gets used against others and how we need to point out how people may not realize it and forgive them too. Because you can see from here, it's so unconscious bias you probably read about. That's what it's like. It's that insidious because there are decisions we need to make. I see a red light. I don't think, is it red? Is it yellow? What does red mean? No, red light, I stop the car or the bike or whatever. So we need it to go fast, but then it doesn't serve us. And how do we separate that out?
Barbara, it's
Yeah.
Patty. Another thing that changed my perspective is when I think it was the World Health Organization recategorized what is middle-aged and what is old. And I don't have the numbers at my fingertips. Might be stuck in my purse somewhere from an aging meeting, but it really stretched it out much more than I would have thought. And I think middle age ends at 70 or something like that. I can't remember the numbers. I don't know if you have it at your fingertips.
I don't know. Sarah might, she's got a lot of the World Health Organization numbers. But regardless of what the number is, what we've seen, and remember, I had my magic wand, you're now free from any chronological attachment. So if you feel like this is a little bit of the messy middle, I'm figuring out what 2021 is going to be like, then you go on and feel like that. If you feel like a middlescent, because you're saying, how can I continue to evolve and grow when the world is changing in such unprecedented ways? And you go ahead and do that. Don't let a number define you, and don't let anyone else use any other indicator to define you either. The last thing I want to bring up, and I'm going to go back to the screen share, and I know that now we're getting tight on time. But let me go to this one last thing. I said a moment ago, leadership is an inside job. And I shared earlier on my website, you can access a 25 question true or false quiz that will give you a score that tells you Are you sputtering? Are you in the blah zone? Are you nearly thriving? Are you thriving? And it's so important because most of us live and work in ways that really run counter to our potential. Because we either read, here's what you, quote, should do, but we know what works for us and we don't trust it. For example, how much sleep people need. When I ask people how much sleep they need, they generally know. So listen to yourself, but then be strict with yourself and live according to really what you know helps you thrive. The self-care is not selfish. I don't know how many of you are working full-time, if any here, but when I'm working with people running companies, this is huge. They feel like, no, I've got to meet everybody else's needs, particularly women. But self-care isn't selfish, regardless of what role you're in, because you can only, be a good representative and role model when you show up literally in the way with the energy. You know, you feel people's energy, even on Zoom, which is what I've been practicing a lot over the past months. So know that what you need to do for yourself, when you have to say no to other people because you need to do the self-care so you can show up when you're with virtually or in person other people, it's important to do that. And the other thing I want to say is not all stress is bad. The goal is not to have a stress-free life, because when we're in a state of flow, which is when you lose track of time and you're involved with something, it means you're doing something to the extent that you're a little zhuzhed, you're focused, like playing an instrument. It doesn't feel negative stressful, but there's a little bit of the kind of focus and attention that is eustress, good, like a eulogy is a good statement when someone passes away. Eustress is good stress. So look for ways that keep you really engaged and on top of your game, not only thinking about not being stressed. And then the last thing I want to say here is your energy is perhaps one of the only growing renewable resources. We are cyclical beings. We sleep in cycles, we eat in cycles. We are not like computers with an on and off switch saying, okay, I've got a busy day and then I'll crash tonight, or a busy week and I'll reboot on the weekend. And people use that language. I don't know if you've noticed it. It's so important to understand that your energy is a reservoir, not an ocean. So know how full your reservoir is and what depletes it. If there are people that deplete it a lot and you need your energy for something else that day, change your plans. Minimize that contact. Know what depletes you and what fills your reservoir so that it can stay full. And taking this quiz should help you with that. So with that said, we have, I think, 5 minutes left. Any comments or questions in our last few minutes?
Kevin.
I would just reinforce, getting back to your topic a few moments ago, Barbara, about your internal dialogue with oneself. But I would urge people to get out of their comfort zone. Obviously, some of us, i.e. Kevin, are pretty social naturally or relatively practiced. But I think people have to get out of their comfort zone of being low profile and be as proactive as they can, sometimes to a point of discomfort, just to get engaged and get used to it.
Great point. A lot of magic happens in your discomfort zone. Yes.
Barbara, it's Patty. One other thing I was thinking about that happens with retirement years is loss of purpose. And I think, and especially during the COVID, when people have not been able to go and do and participate. So it's really, really important to find some purpose that feeds you.
Thank you for saying that. I can do a whole I do a whole talk on purpose and the repotting, and but let me just share this nugget. When I think we have a national obsession about purpose. You know, what's your purpose? And then people get stuck. I don't know. I'm not Mother Teresa. So for those of us who have a sense of purpose, wonderful. And for those of us who don't, there's big P purpose that becomes clear to some of us more easily than others. And then there's little P purpose. And that's could be working in your garden. If that brings you joy, that's your purpose right now, because staying healthy and sane and connected to yourself, if not others in person, is important. Or little P purpose could be, I'm going to do one nice thing that surprises someone else today. And that will feed you. So if your big P purpose isn't so clear, find a little P purpose, and that will help kind of build the path that will result in you finding your big P purpose at the right time.
Barbara.
Melinda.
Thank you. I always ask kids, especially teenagers, what's their passion? And they can relate to that in life to get them to think about the future, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to have, that's a real challenge for me because I'm very lonely now because all my little groups with whom I volunteered with have dried up at the moment. So it's been extremely challenging. I go to the beach a lot. That's where I meditate. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. Yeah. Tell you.
Hard. And so it's so important to know what does bring you joy and gives you energy. And the ocean, the beach, the air, clearly
Clears it all away. Yeah. All my anxieties go. It's great. It's really, yeah.
great.
Any more comments? Silver.
Well, Silver, I'm from Fairfax, California. When you mentioned what's your purpose, I'm in recovery, for example, and in recovery, they give us a purpose. The purpose is to help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. So I've been really fortunate to be in that group and I'm never lonely if I stay engaged that way. So that's just one of the perks of being in recovery. If any of you out there that want to be involved in volunteerism and stuff, there's always something to do in that area.
Thank you.
And also, I just want to, I think this is more relevant, but I got MS at 30. So like I went blind in one eye and I couldn't walk and all that stuff. I had to relearn all of that stuff. So I turned, I had all those elderly symptoms at that age, and I've had it, and now I'm 69. So I don't feel that ageism thing. I don't, because I've experienced it at 30 and all the way till now, but so it doesn't bother me anymore. I kind of caught up with the age that I am now.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Oh, sure, that's it.
I think to the point where someone said, teach kids to discover their passion. Your passion can change over your lifetime, and discovering new passions at this stage of life is a wonderful gift. And then once you have that passion, you find yourself in a position to share it with other people who are interested in that same topic. I know I've found that certainly with my All Things Apple classes. I've had a passion for technology forever. A lot of people our age are intimidated by the technology. And once they get their toe dipped in the water, they can't get enough of it. So they've become passionate about it, and then they share it with their friends. So passion becomes contagious in a good way.
Yes, good point.
I wanted to pass it to Sarah to say a final couple words, but I didn't say that Sarah is actually the Age Forward coordinator for Marin County. So she has a lot of power over what happens in Marin County in terms of aging. And maybe Sarah, if you could say a couple of words about the Age Forward plan and the state's plan, and then sign off and thank Barbara.
Yeah, I will. But first, let's all give Barbara a little applause. This is a precursor to your TED Talk applause.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and allowing for such a rich dialogue. I think it's been very helpful to us, and because we've recorded it, I already know that about 5 other people went to another wrong link, and everybody's asking me if we have a recording. So this is going to go broader than the 23 people that were signed on at one point. And thank all of you for attending this and helping yourselves get ready for 2021. I'll just do a brief sharing. In October, I have been, well, for the past 2 years, I've been following my passions, which is also gerontology, and landed the job of my dreams, which I'm just so happy in, and that's leading the county and its strategic plan for what they call age forward, age friendly. And that's helping all our county departments. It's working with our community organizations and wonderful groups like Age Friendly and Marin Villages to all work together to make our county have the support systems and the programs and the services that all of us need in the county from birth till our end, to have the services that we need to live a happy, healthy, and socially connected life. And so that sounds like a big mission, and it is, but the county has spent a couple of years listening to you. They did an assessment and surveys and focus groups for 2 solid years. And it's the words of the county residents that have created the strategies and the items that we are all working on for the next 3 years. So I'm happy that you've joined the Age Friendly Marin Network, a forum today. This forum is a monthly forum produced and are organized by all of the leaders of our villages, age-friendly villages. And we'd love to hear from you about other programs and areas of information that you'd like to hear about in future forums. We'd love your ideas. So send those to, I guess, does everyone probably has Patty's email.
Or you can put them in the chat right now if you have
put them in the
ideas of
chat.
anything
Yeah.
you'd like to hear about.
Indeed. But we're so happy you joined us. And Barbara, thank you. We all wish you well on your TED Talk. We'll check out your website and your quiz. And thank you for helping us to get beyond looking at our number today.
Thank you for all being here. I really enjoyed being with you.
Thank you,
you.
Barbara.
It was great.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you,
Everybody
Barbara.
stay
Happy
safe.
holidays.